Welcome to From Leads to Leases, a CCR Growth podcast that helps senior living providers transform their complex challenges into opportunities. Listen in for stories from industry leaders, innovative strategies, and insights. And with our expertise, learn how to increase occupancy faster, guaranteed.
Welcome back to another episode of From Leads to Leases, the podcast that dives deep into the senior living and senior care industries, bringing you insights, strategies, and stories from the experts at the forefront of marketing and sales. I'm your host, Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth. For those of you who don't know about us, CCR Growth is a full-service marketing and growth agency exclusive to the senior living industry. And at our core, we help providers achieve three things. Number one, we deliver highly qualified leads that convert to tours and move-ins in less time. Number two, we help reduce or remove the reliance on paid referrals, significantly reducing your cost per move-in. And three, we measure, optimize, align, and integrate all your marketing and sales systems to track crucial data, such as acquisition costs or the length of your sales cycle, helping your communities make more informed decisions that positively impact growth, sustainability, and profitability. So through this podcast, I'm here to guide you through the evolving landscape of the senior living industry, helping communities connect with families and residents they serve in more meaningful and effective ways that impact your bottom line. So today, we're joined by Jules Wilhelm, the founder and president of Capacity Leadership Center and EQ University. Jules brings over 20 years of experience in coaching and counseling leaders, specializing in emotional intelligence and empathetic leadership. Her work with senior living communities focuses on transforming managers into effective leaders while fostering cultures that support staff retention and community engagement. So in this episode, we'll explore how emotional intelligence impacts leadership in senior living, the tools Jules provides to help leaders build trust and empathy, and how these skills ultimately lead to stronger teams and better resident care. Jules, welcome to the show. We're excited to learn from your expertise today.
Thank you for having me, Jerry.
Yeah. There's a lot packed into that intro, so I'm definitely excited to get into more about your background and all about emotional intelligence is such a big part, I think, within the senior living space, just because it's a tough job, right? There's a lot that goes into it.
For sure.
So you've had an incredible journey transitioning from clinical psychology to organizational leadership and senior living. Can you share what inspired you to focus on leadership training and emotional intelligence, specifically within the senior living industry?
I did some adjunct work as a professor for an institution, and they had clinical work, and then they had organizational psych. And it was like a newer institution, and like, hey, we've got plenty of people doing the clinical. Would you mind doing some org psych? And I'm like, sure. So being the risk taker I am, I read the books and then taught them 2 weeks later. And it just opened my mind to the idea of impacting more people at one time, because we spend 40 to 50 hours a week at work. And
Sure.
If those environments are not psychologically healthy and our leaders could be given a boost in that, imagine the trickle-down effect. That just got me so excited. So then I started investing in that. And in particular, the senior living, there was a VP of ops who was a student of mine. Invited me to his management company, 12 Oaks in Dallas, and said, let's do a retreat. So we just did like a kind of, here's the big overview, here's how it could be. And then they asked me for a long-term engagement, and I am still working with them to this day. So the question, though, about what made me want to do senior living is this. I could do a lot of things with my life. There's a lot of different places I could serve. I am very interested in serving the people who are doing hard things. And senior living is a hard thing. And not every one of us is designed to do that. I know I'm not. I'm not gifted in that way. But what I am gifted in is in how I can create environments that support them, allowing them to use their special gifts in the world. And anyone who's in senior living more than 18 months, I have to say, you're my kind of people.
Yeah, hats off. For sure. Absolutely. To support the senior living industry, you've developed these unique programs like EQ University and the Impact Program. So how did these initiatives come to life, and what gaps in senior living leadership were you aiming to address with those programs?
Well, the overarching gap we're looking at is retention. And my experience is that that comes from employee engagement and employee satisfaction. And then, of course, it trickles down into resident satisfaction. The cost of turnover is so significant in this industry that
Mhm.
making headway in it takes time and effort, and it is totally possible. So the Impact Program was designed as I collaborated with the 12 Oaks leadership around my skill set, their needs, and we've developed a really robust program that can be done at many different places now, which really focuses on the needs of the executive director and then the needs of the home office to support the executive director. And then for those who are really robust, we also do a trifecta experience where we invite the nursing staff, leaders, the marketing, and the executive director.
That's great. Yeah, get everybody into one space. That makes sense. And then in terms of retention, I mean, turnover costs are so high for communities. I know I was reading on your website, just looking at a average assisted living community employing 67 staff members, they can see an annual turnover cost as high as $85,000. I mean, where does that number come from? I mean, how do you go about calculating or factoring in what turnover costs look
Yeah.
like?
Well, let's simplify it to the cost of replacing one person.
Sure.
Okay, so if we have one leader, $100,000 a year, and I believe the current one is 1.5 times the salary to replace it. So that's just for that one position. What I know from reality is that if you have an executive director leave, often other leaders go with them. Senior living tends to be sort of people like to stick together once they find a good working, peers. So if their property is sold, they might just pick up and stay with the other people, right? Or they might go with the new management. But it's about the people that they're working with that creates the retention, because they are retained like almost to each other. So where does the savings come in? Is if they're in the program and you retain one senior living executive, $1,000 a year, and there's all sorts of reasons people leave. And if you can help them walk through it, either burnout or conflict or disappointment with leadership in some way, and you can help them to bridge that gap and get back into work and enjoying themselves, it saved you $150,000. The statistics with 12 Oaks, so I've been working with them quite a while, so it didn't happen overnight. But I've been working with them, being in Dallas 4 to 6 times a year with the program. And in 2023, their statistic was 2.9% turnover. Industry average is 15 to 20. There's an article in the senior living news that we can link below that talks about more of those statistics and how 12 Oaks has been using the program.
It's pretty amazing too, I think, how delicate the ecosystem within a senior living community is. It's almost like a house of cards. Like you were saying, one person leaves and it just starts this chain reaction. We've seen any of the communities that we've worked with where there's kind of been occupancy issues. It always goes back to staff, and it always started with some of the top leaders of the organization leaving or moving on or moving into different positions. And it created this chain reaction where other people started leaving. And then because they left, some of the residents or family members decided they were going to leave too. So it just creates this really difficult chain of events that's hard to recover sometimes.
And that's why it's important to look at all the levels of senior living. The kind of people I'm looking for are owners and property managers who really know the backbone of this is the executive director. And the executive director's skill set, as well as who they show up to be on a Monday morning, no matter what is going on in their life. In other words, their emotional intelligence and their ability to communicate, their ability to emotionally regulate when, intention is high, all of those things. If the home office and the owners believe that it's both, that the value of both the return on investment is like balanced by the return on relationship. So think of ROI and ROR. You can also think of it as task and relationship. So we have to continually balance between task and relationship and create in a culture that does that from the top down. So it really requires the leaders to say, yes, that's important. And we're going to carve out space and time to deliver that experience of we value you, you matter to the executive directors and the properties. Now, I've worked with a ton of different senior living places where they do all sorts of things to try to retain. It's gift cards and appreciation and all the wonderful things, very good things. And we're never quite sure what works.
Yeah.
Right?
Non-tangible sometimes.
Yeah. And so one of those things is just accepting that you're going to constantly be looking at this part of your business. Like just surrender to the reality that it is because of the intensity of what we are doing is that you're going to have to constantly reinvigorate and it's not just money or programs, it's mostly relational. And so when we help the executive directors build a culture that is based on a strategy of being connected so that people know each other, having very clear tactics that they matter, how we communicate that, and then measuring results. So known, matter, and measure. And having those three pillars of culture at any one time helps reorient decision-making. It reorients conflict. It helps us get back in the game of what's really important here. And essentially gives leaders a roadmap in those times of stress.
I think that's so important. And my next question was going to be about emotional intelligence. So I'm glad you brought it up. But yeah, so on your website, it says EQ is not in opposition to IQ. I love that. And it says it's not the triumph of heart over head. It's the unique intersection of both. So I think you're really talking to that point there that I think communities really need to wrap their head around. And I think like what I was saying is it's not tangible in a sense that a lot of owners, operators, providers, they really just want to focus on like what's driving move-ins, what's our cost per lead and all of these numbers. But it's like at the end of the day, we're building communities, we're building homes, like we're trying to create a sense of home for residents, for staff, like for the entire community. So I think like the only way to do that is to really tap into that emotional connection that has to be formed and that culture that you're talking about that needs to be created. So I love that.
Yeah, it's the reality is that emotions are viral. They're catchy. We all learned during COVID, you have to be at least 6 feet away from people. Well, if you have a home and someone walks in and they're a mom, dad, authority, or even an ornery teenager, which I have, they walk in the room, you can feel it. It's the same in senior living. You're creating a home where people need to feel safe and engaged and freedom and they have to get work done. So it's this competency, which many times can be taught. We can take an executive director training, we can get a nursing license, but this internal capacity to show up in the way that you need to in senior living. I love the tagline we use in the impact training, which we got from Dr. Henry Cloud, is building character, and character is defined as the ability to meet the demands of reality.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
Because let's face it, reality for a senior living executive, it could be like a pipe burst and I'm turning into a contractor. And so while I have my finger in this dike, there's family members coming in that are upset because they have to move their loved one down 3 apartments because there's, wet. I mean, the skill set that is needed to emotionally regulate and to serve up in a servant-hearted way, it's asking a lot. It's a lot. It's a hard job.
And you work with everyone from like the home VP, office VPs, regional directors, all the way down to like the frontline staff. So how do you tailor that approach to meet the unique challenges faced by leaders at different levels in senior living communities?
That's a great question. different levels need different things. I want to make sure that the leaders are on board with the return on relationship and return on investment, that those things go hand in hand. So, so home office is all about them really being invested and verbalizing from the top down that we
Sure.
support the relational aspect, which means they take some time to do it, they invest some money, and they talk about it. So we have to get that into the culture. The second thing is focusing on the executive directors who are the backbone of the community and working on making sure they have all of the skills to avoid burnout. The biggest is the community. So what we do is we teach them an emotional intelligence language and skills where they practice that with each other. So they're talking about the hard things they face in a room with people who really get it. I can't tell you how relieved people are after an hour or two, because we usually meet for a full day, that they're like, they thought I was the only one dealing with this, and I'm not. And not only that, to have the personal and pragmatic support from someone who's been there, it just goes worlds into supporting them and retaining them. It's like, oh, I can make it another week. And I do love this. I love this job. I love this people. It reminds them of what's really truly why they're doing it.
Yeah.
And then at those meetings, I have over time learned I need to empower the executive directors and the department heads to bring it back to the property. What we've landed on is creating in-services. So in the program, at any one time, you can choose from 5 or 6 in-services that might fit your property, that increase connection, that increase competency, or that works on a skill or a concept that we're learning. Like we might be talking about accountability and the ladder of accountability. So it's very simple on some level. We have we laminate it, put it up, and we talk about it, bring it up at stand up. So there are different tools like that. We also do things that are, here's a freebie. Are everybody ready? Here's an in-service. There's tension in the room, or, something rocky happened. You had maybe a very disappointed family member and you guys want to get back to equilibrium. Okay. I call it known by your phone. So you're in stand up, everyone pull out your phone and get 2 pictures that you'd be willing to share with your neighbor. So you pull that up and you share it with them, and you get to talk about your dog with the silly, Santa costume, or your kid who had a soccer game, and you get back to just like, we're human beings here together. We're in this together. And those very simple things that just they get lost in most businesses, but in senior living, because of the demands of the people in front of you that we are there to meet, it's about having that in front of them and having something quick and easy to do. And what's fun is the executive directors start to make up their own in-services like this. Like they watch a TED Talk. There's this one called What's in Your Bag. Look it up, TED Talk, What's in Your Bag. Executive director came to me and he said, I showed this to my team, and then we did a little exercise with a bag and we talked about it. I'm like, that's brilliant. Let's teach everyone.
That's great.
So it's about thinking about how to bring it in a bite-sized way to the property. And like anything else, there have to be visual reminders. There has to be consistent presence. And one aspect of the program is that we do individual coaching. We just do 30-minute touch-base coaching sessions with the executive directors, which allows them to sort of be held accountable to, hey, are you using the in-services? Are you bringing this back to your culture? Because otherwise it won't, right? They'll just receive it. And it's great if they feel good, but we want them to bring it all the way back and bring it
implement. Right.
Right. So here's where it's also valuable for us on our team to coach and train the RVPs or whoever the regionals are. So you asked about what they need. They're sort of in between, right? They're usually they supervise a number of executive directors, perhaps. What they need is the information that we're providing and wanting to replicate with their team, so they can bring that into their conversation. They can hold them accountable for that, but they can also enjoy that because a lot of them are quite fun. And then what I find really effective is I do something called EI Lab, Emotional Intelligence Lab, with the regionals. And what that is like a supportive process where they can talk about things that are hard, that are going on with a facilitator in the room and practicing those skills so that they can talk about things they might not normally talk about to get unity, to get structure. So for example, it's fairly common for a whole portfolio, 5 to 10 properties to come in, right? And then you have to add an RVP or two because you're supervising them.
Sure.
How do you get the RVPs to be in sync? Because they're typically, they're in home office, but they're doing their own thing and they're supporting their properties. And some companies do it where they have like maybe a quarterly meeting where everyone gets together, kind of reports. There are different ways to do that. What I add the value is the experience that I create in the Emotional Intelligence Lab allows, for example, in one real life example is that these 3 new RVPs came in and they're like, how do we break into the new gang? Like those splits can so easily happen, even when there is no new gang or old gang. But people come in with that and feel like maybe they're not getting as much attention or they're the ugly stepchild or whatever that is. It's amazing when you create a space for someone to say, I kind of feel like I'm not really in sync with you guys. And there's a way for people like, oh, well, what do you need from us?
Yeah.
People want to do that.
Especially in this industry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants to help. Thank you. Thank you for all that information. That's great. To just understand how you help each kind of level and your approach to, I think it's really great that you don't just have this one thing that you're doing. It's so unique to each level of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen kind of I don't want to say the acceptance, but the understanding of EQ change? Has it become more of a thing that leadership is now kind of asking for? Whereas before, I think people were just kind of like, I'm not sure if that's something we need or want to invest in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're 100% right. They're in the soft skill category, right?
Yeah.
And where most of business and historically has focused on is the IQ. What is your competency? What's your degree? Well, thank God for the new research, which is clear that when people have higher EQ and they have the same degree, you have more productivity with the person with higher EQ and even more financial productivity for the company. So it's less of a battle to say, hey, it's important. There's more understanding in that. It's still very difficult for people to wrap their minds around paying for it and taking the time out to invest there. Even for the people getting it, they're like, are you kidding me? I'm going to leave my property for 4 times a year for a whole day just to invest in my own development? And I'll be completely transparent. The first 2 times they come to the impact program, they're like, waste of time. What are we doing? I mean, for sure. I know even the people who are getting the stuff. So
Sure.
yeah, it's like the 3rd session and they've tried some of the things and they're like, oh, there might be something to this, that they sort of get more warmed up and become more believers and then eventually pretty much become ambassadors for it. So it's still not an easy sell, but I think people know it's important. And I think what we've developed, the impact program, is we know a structure that works, but I also know that every company has different needs. And so we take the basic structure and say, what parts work for you? We have to have a virtual component for many places because travel just is not going to happen for everyone. It's just not viable. And it can be done. That community can be done and the burnout can be addressed and the leadership skills, it can all be done if we put some time and creativity into it.
I was thinking while you were saying that about the difficulty of that, trying to create a space that wasn't because I know, like, I've done a lot of facilitation work in men's circles, for example, and other spaces. And I know that, like, getting people in a room together makes such a difference energetically in
Mhm.
working with them and getting them to, like, put their walls down,
Mhm.
their guard down, rather than just being through a screen. It's a very different experience. So the fact that you're able to do that in both scenarios is really great.
Thanks.
I was going to ask you about the tools or techniques that you recommend for managing emotional resistance. 'Cause I think we're kind of like, me asking that question was kind of talking about the resistance, but I don't know.
Okay, so let's talk about resistance in accountability and then resistance in sales. Okay, so
Okay.
I think there's two different things here. So um, in the resistance, when you want to hold someone accountable, it's often an emotional barrier. It's not a competency barrier. Anyone knows how to take the trash out once they're
Sure.
doing what we do. Okay, and once you learn how to do, the lifts safely, once you learn how to do uh, any of the med cart stuff, all of those things, right? We learn it. But then why don't we follow through? There's the real question. And asking why is never going to create solutions. Here's another freebie. Never yawn. You, always, why, and never. If you start with any of those, you're not going to get very far in an accountability conversation. What we work on is we talk about getting underneath the resistance by understanding the emotional barrier and walking them through. And that's where the EQ University comes in. EQ University is a skill-based experience. So it's like what actually comes out your mouth and how to make that an automatic response, like riding a bike, to get to understand what's going on for someone in a short period of time to get them back to work.
What would be an example of that? If somebody knows how to take the trash out, but they're not doing it, how do you address that?
So, hey, Joan, I noticed that you didn't take the trash out. I'm curious what happened. Well, I just ran out of time and I just, okay, so tell me more. You ran out of time? Well, I didn't really run out of time. I was thinking the next shift, they should do their share. Oh, so it's
Mm.
feeling like a little unfair? Or I'm curious about that unfair feeling. Well, yeah, you know what they left for us? And so what happens is you get more and more information and then you realize it's a shift change issue. And so that curiosity about the emotional barrier shows people that you care about what's going on for them. You're not doing a blame or shame, and you're also just not going to be command and control. It's a whole different way of leading.
Yeah. It's not really about the garbage at that point. So you've made
Mhm.
that clear. So that's a great way to frame it.
Let's take a minute and talk about emotional intelligence in the sales cycle.
Okay.
Uh, Selling in senior living is, I mean, talk about emotions and talk about a journey. I mean, you're dealing with major life transition. And when you get anxious in a call or in a tour and you're like, we got to fill that apartment, where, we were 2 down this last month, our budget, you got all that stuff going on inside of you. What do you think the emotion is that you're sending toward them? It's either desperate or anxious or anything besides warm and friendly. And if this is the right fit for you, you're going to know it. And I can't wait. And I hope that you join us, and all the things that we're supposed to be doing. Or we feature dump. Come here because we have yoga. We have nail salon. We have a hairdresser. The feature dumping,
Oh,
that might be something they look at in a brochure, but when they're really thinking about moving their loved one in, what they want to know is that you stopped and noticed that there was a catch in their voice when they said, we'll sell the house. Sounds like selling the house is a big deal. Yeah, I grew up there. Yeah, I planted my apple tree. Tell us about that. That'll be hard. It's about that attunement to the real resistance is a grief process. There's so much letting go. There's so much letting go. And no one lets go when you play tug of war. Instead, we sit down beside them and we look at the rope. And we say, yeah, this is a hard one to let go of, isn't it? And you might need some time, and I'm happy to talk through it with you. And then how would you talk with your mom or dad about that? And so it's the pause to say, I'm noticing you. I'm not just trying to move you through into a decision, but you give someone 5 minutes of deep listening. And let's even stretch it. You give someone 5 minutes of deep listening over 6 months, because that's how long it's taken them to realize, I really can't let dad drive. I just can't. I mean, like that. Do you know how hard it is to make that from denial to yes, that's true?
Yeah.
And then how hard it is to bring it to the parent? I mean, it requires a lot. And if you have someone checking in on you every so often and really listening to how hard it is without trying to make a decision forced before you're ready, they're going to come to you because you represent the whole emotional experience that they're going to have when they move in. So my recommendation is that you do EQ training as your onboarding for every marketer. I have a program where you can do a 3-month, once a week. We learn the skills, we nail it. And in their onboarding, in those first 3 months when they're getting their skis, like not trying to figure out how to do things here, and they're learning the process. Let's talk about IQ, EQ for a salesperson.
Sure.
So you've got your sales process, you've got your scripts, you've got your numbers, you've got, things you need to know, information, IQ. And then you have the EQ in the way you deliver them information, the way you ask questions. And so every company has their own process. Like they might have your process, they might have a different theory that they attend to. What I love about EQ training is that it fits into any sales process. It doesn't matter what CRM you use or what your theory of moving people in is all about. The emotional intelligence training slips right into those, because there will be moments, I guarantee you, if you were to ask a marketer how many times a day they could have paused and given more space to be like, I want to hear about that because that sounds hard. Most of us don't do that, Jerry, because emotions are hard and we don't want to feel our own, and we have to manage our own in order to be present to someone else. It's a lot. And these are skills that anyone who wants to can learn.
I think empathy is a really difficult skill for someone to learn. Being sympathetic is easy, I think, but being empathetic and actually putting yourself in that situation takes a lot of training and a lot of skill.
Can I double click on that?
Yeah.
Okay. So the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is feeling about, like, sorry for, right? It's distance. Empathy, I think there's a nuance here that we're talking about. Do I have to know what your life is like? Do I have to feel it? The truth is, I don't think you do. And I'll tell you why. As a therapist, if I had to feel everything in my first career as a psychotherapist for over 20 years, if I had to feel everything that a victim abuse went
through, a lot of weight on your shoulders.
how long could anyone do that career? So empathy is a skill that is more about identifying and attuning to the emotion the other person is having. So I don't have to take on a feeling if you're sad, but I can say, I really see how sad you are. And it matters. And I get it. And you validate it, or you join it, or you just pause instead of moving through. That creates the empathy. I hope that we could be empathic towards people that we've never been in a tornado or we've never been in an earthquake. But we can have the courage to let them feel their fear or their grief without having to fix it, without having to make their emotions get smaller because I'm uncomfortable. And so the key for a marketer is to be courageous enough to know it's a loving and wonderful thing for you to move toward their pain and sit with them in their pain. Now, is that part of any sales? Yes, it is. We pour salt on the pain, salt on the wound once we find the pain. But a truly good salesperson in senior living has true empathy, and they just bring it into that where they can press in and say, we have what you need. And I'm going to let you feel these painful feelings until you decide you're ready to make a change. That's a big thing.
I think a lot of people do. They try to put themselves in someone else's shoes, or they can only connect with people who've had or experienced the same things that they have, and so then it almost devalues their experience to some degree. Like, why do I have to have had the same experience as you in order for me to understand how you're feeling? Versus, like, if I'm able to truly understand, the emotion that someone is feeling, and be able to make them feel seen and heard and supported in that, I think that's really powerful. So I love that you put that out there and explain the difference, because I think more people need to understand that.
Yes, I want the world to
Myself
understand
included.
this. Yes, and it's a skill you
Yeah.
can learn.
Yeah. No, I love that. Okay, so getting on to the challenges and opportunities within the senior living industry. I mean, what do you think is the biggest challenge in leadership development for senior living today, and how do you think the industry can better support its leaders?
I think the biggest challenge in senior living is when a leader transitions, an emerging leader, into a new position, they're often not equipped, either they just don't have the tenure because our bench is so small, or they haven't had the time to invest in the learning process. And an onboarding should be a learning process, but most of the time it's you build the plane while you're flying. And that's what senior living is. I think one of the biggest challenges is doing onboarding well so that people can going into feeling equipped to meet the demands of the intensity of the reality. So I think the second thing there is once there's there's clarity over what information is available, where it is, what the processes are, then I think it's about avoiding burnout. I think the second biggest thing is moving into a place where we don't keep pushing because we don't have the staff, where we find a solution for that. And I think, again, it's really about retention. It's really about retention and retaining the leaders that have been there a while, and continuing to infuse them with energy and vision and hope, and that they're not alone doing this.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. From a leadership training perspective too, I know it's difficult to quantify outcomes. I mean, have you found that there's some, I don't want to say easy ways, but are there some tried and true ways that you've been able to quantify outcomes or help senior
Yeah.
living providers quantify outcomes?
I think we're going to be looking at qualitative research. We're just going to be looking at the end of the year surveys, right? We're going to be looking at what people say. What I can say is when I ask in our yearly survey, did this training contribute to retaining you or one of your staff? 78% said yes. That's pretty good.
That's good data.
So that's, it's self-report, but then we also have the one hard data I do have is from the 12 Oaks experience, that it's 2.9% turnover. So what we would look for is year over year for that to go down and retention to move up. I think it's not easy to quantify. And so it would be great if we had more tools for that. I think we have some basic things. But what I can tell you is that people want to come back once they're out of the impact program. They want to come back to that company because they provide that. Oh, here's an interesting, it's one-off, but stay with me. Someone who's in my program, she started as a activities coordinator. So she got in, even though they didn't usually have them. She was an activities coordinator. Then she was a marketer. And then she went to another company as an executive director.
Mhm.
She took all of the things with her that she learned, and she was doing them at her new company without, just kind of doing her own thing, building her community. Her VP came to her and said, "Where'd you learn this? This is great." And she's like, "Well, I can introduce you to Jules because we would love to have that program here." So the idea that it made such an impact, that the tools that I taught, she was in the program for 4 to 6 years, I think. 3 years later, she's using them.
That's powerful.
I mean, if we're just conservative and you think we've retained, 76% said yes, you helped in retention. Let's
Sure.
say we're conservative and you just helped retain a $50,000 employee for 20 properties for 6 years. What's the math on that? So
Yeah,
1.5 times their salary. So it's worth it.
absolutely. So outside of EQ University and other leadership programs, are there any exciting projects or developments that our audience should look out for in the coming future?
Yeah. Another program that I have been doing for a long time is a high-level leadership in-person mastermind where I live outside of Chicago, so people fly in from around the country and we meet in person 1 whole day a month. So this is for someone who is a really high level where essentially when you get to a certain level, there's no one to talk to about the things that matter the most or the things that keep you up at night because it's just not appropriate on one level. And 2, would they really understand what it's like to be a C-suite or go into a board meeting and have to make $1 million decisions?
Yeah,
So
lonely at the top.
it is lonely at the top. It's just true. So from an EQ and leadership training, we blend those together and we create a cohort of people who can support each other from around the country. And that is opening up in March this year. So I'll have seats available there in March. And then my EQ University, I've had 101 for 4 years, 201 for 3 years. And this year I'm starting a 3rd level. I'm going to be doing 301. And I'm excited about that launching.
Very cool. And always we put all that stuff in the show notes. So how can our audience stay connected with you and learn more about your work through Capacity Leadership Center and EQ University?
If you are interested, staying in touch with me on LinkedIn. For people who are interested in talking with me about my services, you can go to Jules at juleswilhelm.com. For the senior living, it's capacityleadership.com. So I have 2 different websites. One is the larger programs that I do, and one is just senior living. So Capacity is the senior living. But on both of those websites, you can click and set up a 30-minute discovery call just to get to know me, and I can understand your world, and we can talk EQ and have a virtual coffee. I would love that.
Cool. I'll make sure to put all that in the show notes. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Jules Wilhelm. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise in leadership and emotional intelligence. Jules' insights on building empathetic and resilient cultures in senior living remind us of the power of compassion and connection in transforming communities. If you want to stay connected with Jules and learn more about her work, be sure to visit her websites at capacityleadership.com and juleswilhelm.com, and also her LinkedIn profile, which I'll include all of those links in the show notes. As always, we hope you found this episode insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform and stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to explore the dynamic world of senior living marketing and sales. Also, remember that From Leads to Leases isn't just an audio experience. We're also a video podcast. So if you want to see the video versions of our episodes, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels. I'm Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth. Thank you for joining us on From Leads to Leases, where we're giving you all of these great senior living industry insights for free and asking nothing in return other than for you to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who might find it useful. I'm truly grateful for your time and attention. Until next time, lead with strategy and with heart. Chat with you again soon. Thanks, Jules.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to From Leads to Leases. Are you ready to fill your rooms faster and increase occupancy? Visit ccrgrowth.com to learn about our Senior Growth Innovation Suite, a proven system to generate highly qualified tour-ready leads, accelerate sales, and reduce acquisition costs. Let's connect and turn your challenges into opportunities. See you next time.